Hello friends, my name is Dixita and today I give some information from the psychology of money book. In this next chapter is the 19 is all together now. This quote is what we learn about the psychology of your own money. Congratulations, you are still reading. It's time to tie together a few things we have learned. This chapter is a bit of summary, a few short and actionable lessons that can help you make better financial decisions. First, let me tell you a story about a dentist appointment gone horrible already. It teaches us something vital about the dangers of giving advice about what to do with your money. Clarence Hughes went to the dentist in 1931. His mouth was radiating pain. His dentist put him under crude anesthesia to ease the pain. When Clarence awoke, hours later he had 16 fewer teeth and his tonsil removed. And then everything went wrong. Clarence died a week later from his surgery complications. His wife sued the dentist, but not because the surgery went away. Every surgery risked death in 1931. Clarence, she said, never consented to the procedure in the first place and wouldn't if he were asked. The case wove through court, but when now where? Consent between doctor and patient wasn't black and white in 1931. One court summed up the idea that doctors require freedom to make the best medical decision. Without such, we could not enjoy the advancement of society. For most of history, the ethos of medicine was that the doctor's job was to fix the patient, and what the patient thought about the doctor's treatment plans wasn't relevant. Dr. J. Katz wrote about the philosophy in his book, The Silent World Between Doctor and Patient. Doctors felt that in order to accomplish that objective, they were obligated to attend to their patients' physical and emotional needs and to do so on their own authority, without consulting with their patients about a decision that needed to be made. The idea that patients may also be entitled to sharing the burden of decision with their doctors was never part of the ethos of medicine. This wasn't ego or malice. It was a belief in 2 points. First is every patient wants to be cured. Second is there is a universal and right way to cure them. Not requiring patient consent in treatment plans makes sense if you believe in those 2 points, but that's not how medicine works. In the last 50 years, medical schools stopped shifted teaching away from treated disease and toward treating patients. That meant laying out the option of treatment plans and then letting the patient decide the best path forward. This trend was partly driven by patient protection laws, partly by Kurt's influential book, which argued that patients have widely different view about what's worth it in medicine, so their beliefs have to be taken into consideration. Cart wrote, it is dangerous nonsense to assert that in the practice of their art and science physicians can rely on their involvement, innovations, their ability to judge what is the right things to do. It is not that easy. Medicine is a complex profession and the interaction between physician and patient are also complex. That last line is important. Medicine is a complex profession and the interaction between physician and patient are also complex. You know, what profession is the same? Financial advice. I can't tell you what to do with your money because I don't know you. I don't know what you want. I don't know when you want it. I don't why you want it. So, I am not going to tell you what to do with your money. I don't want to treat you like a dentist treated clearance uses. But doctors and dentists aren't useless. Obviously, they have knowledge. They know the words. They know what tends to work. Even if patients come to different conclusions about what kinds of treatment is right for them, financial advisors are the same. There are universal truths in money. Even if people come to different conclusions about how they want to apply those truths to their own finance. With that caveat in place, let's look at a few short recommendations that can help you make better decisions with your money. Go out of your way to find humility when things are going right and forgiveness compassion when they go wrong. Because it's never as good or as bad as it looks. The world is big and complex. Luck and risk are both real and hard to identify. Do so when judging both yourself and others. Respect the power of luck and risk, and you will have a better chance of focusing on things you can actually control. You will also have a better chance of finding the right role models. Less ego, more wealth. Saving money is the gap between your ego and your income, and wealth is one what you don't see. So, wealth is created by suppressing what you could buy today in order to have more stuff or more option in the future. No matter how much you earn, you will never build wealth unless you can put a lid on how much fun you can have with your money right now today. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That's different from saying you should aim to earn the highest returns or save a specific percentage of your income. Some people won't sleep well unless they're earning the highest returns. Others will only get a good rest if they're conservatively invested. To each their own. But the foundation of does this help me sleep at night is the best universal guide post for all financial decisions. If you want to do better as an investor, the single most powerful things you can do is increase your time horizon. Time is the most powerful force in investing. It makes little things grow, big and big mistakes fade away. It can't naturalize luck and risk, but it pushes result closer toward what people deserve. Become okay with a lot of things going wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune because a small minority of things account for the majority of outcomes. No matter what you are doing with your money, you should be comfortable with a lot of stuff not working. That's just how the world is, so you should always measure how you have done by looking at your full portfolio rather than individual investments. It is fine to have a large chunk of poor investments and a few outstanding ones. That's usually the best case scenario. Judging how you have done by focusing on individual investments makes winners look more brilliant than they were and loser appears more regrettable than they should. Use money to gain control over your time because not having control of your time is such a powerful and universal drag on happiness. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want to, pays the highest dividend that exists in finance. Be nicer and less flashy. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. You might think you want a fancy car or a nice watch, but what you probably want is respect and admiration, and you are more likely to gain those things through kindness and humility than horsepower and chrome. Save, just save. You don't need a specific reason to save. It's great to save for a car or a down payment or a medical emergency, but saving for things that are impossible to predict or define is one of the best reasons to save. Everyone's life is continuous chain of surprising saving that aren't earmarked for anything is particular is a hedge against life's inevitable ability to surprise the hell out of you at the worst possible moment. Define the cost of success and be ready to pay it because nothing worthwhile is free. And remember that most financial costs don't have visible price tags. Uncertainty, doubt, and regret are common costs in the finance world. They are often worth paying, but you have to view them as fees rather than fines. Worship rooms for error. A gap between what could happen in the future and what you need to happen in the future in order to do well is what gives you endurance. And endurance is what makes compounding magic over time. Room for error often looks like a conservative hedge, but if it keeps you in the game, it can you pay you itself many times over. Avoid the extreme ends of financial decisions. Everyone's goals and desires will change over time, and the more extreme your past decisions were, the more you may regret them as you involve. You should like risk because it pays off your over time, but you should be paranoid of ruins risk because it prevents you from taking future risks that will pay off over time. Define the game you are playing and make sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game. Respect the mess. Smart, informed, and reasonable people can disagree is finance because people have vastly different goals and desire. There is no single right answer, just the answer that works for you. Now, let me tell you what works for me. Today's next chapter is 20, and last chapter is this chapter is Confessions, the psychology of my own money. Sandy Gottsaman, a billionaire investor who founded the consulting group First Mahatam, is said to ask one question when interviewing candidates for his investment team: what do you want and why? Not what stocks do you think are cheap or what economy is about to have a recession. Just show me what you do with your own money. I love this question because it highlights what can often be a mile wide gap between what makes sense, which is what people suggest you do, and what feels right to them, which is what they actually do. Half of all US mutual fund portfolios managers do not invest a cent of their own money in their funds, according to Morningstar. This might seem outrageous, and surely the statistic uncovers some hypocrisy. But this kinds of stuff is more common than you did think. Ken Murray, a professor of medicine at USC, wrote an essay in 2011 titled "How Doctors Die" that showed the degree to which doctors choose different end-of-life treatment for themselves than they recommend for their patients. Don't die like the rest of us, he wrote. What's unusual about them is not how much treatment they get compared to most Americans, but how little for all the time they spend fending off the deaths of others. They tends to be fairly serene, where when faced with death themselves. They know exactly what is going to happen. They know the choice, and they generally have access to any sort of medical care they could want, but they go gently. A doctor may throw the kitchen sink at her patient patient's cancer, but chose palliative care for herself. The difference between what someone suggests you do and what they do for themselves isn't always the bad things. It just underscores that when dealing with complicated and emotional issues that affect you and your family, there is no one right answer. There is no universal truth. There's only what works for you and your family. Checking in the box you want checked in the way that leaves you comfortable and sleeping well at night. There are basic principles that must be adhered to. This is true in finance and in medicine. But important financial decisions are not made in spreadsheets or in text boxes. Books. They are made at the dinner table. They often aren't made with the intention of maximizing returns but minimizing the chance of disappointing a spouse or child. Those kinds of things are difficult to summarize in charts of formulas and they vary widely from person to person. What works for one person may not work for another. We have to find what works for you. Here, what works for me. How my family thinks about saving. Charlie Munger once said, I did not intend to get rich, I just want to get independent. We can leave aside rich, but independence has always been my personal financial goal. Chasing the highest returns or leveraging my asset to live the most luxurious life has little interest to me. Both look like games people do to impress their friends, and both have hidden risks. I mostly just want to wake up every day, knowing my money, my family, and I can do whatever we want to do on or our own terms. Every financial decisions we make revolves around the goals. My parents lived their adult years in two stages: that poor and moderately well off. My father became a doctor when he was 40 and already had three kids. Earning a doctor's salary did not offset the frugal mentality that it forced when supporting three hungry kids viably in medical schools, and my parents spent the good years living living well below their means with a high savings rate. This gave them a degree of independence. My father was as emergency room doctor, one of the highest stress professions I can imagine, and one that requires a painful tugging of circadian rhythmic between night and day shifts. After 2 decades, he decided he had enough, so he stopped. Just quite moved on to the next phases of his life. Just stuck with in being able to wake up one morning and change what you are doing on your own terms whenever you are ready seems like the grandmother of all financial goals. Independence to me doesn't mean you will stop working. It means you only do the work you like with people you like at the times you want for as long as you want. And achieving some levels of this independence does not rely on earning a doctor's income. It's mostly a matter of keeping your expectation in check and living below your means. Independence at any income levels is driven by your savings rate, and past a certain level of income your savings rate is driven by your ability to keep your lifestyle expectation from running away. My wife and I met in college and moved in with each other years before we got married. After school, we both had entry level jobs with entry level pay and settled into a moderate lifestyle. All lifestyle exist on a spectrum, and what is decent to one person can feel likely royalty or poverty to another. But at our incomes, we got what we considered a decent apartment, a decent car, decent clothes, decent food, comfortable but nothing close to fancy. Despite more than a decades of rising incomes, myself in finance, my wife in healthcare. We have more or less stayed at that lifestyle ever since. That's pushed our savings rate continuously higher. Virtually every dollar of raise has accrued to saving our independence fund.
Our independence fund. We now live considerably below our means, which tells you little about our income and more about our decision to maintain a lifestyle that we established in our 20s. If that's part of our household financial plan, I am proud of it that we got the goalpost of lifestyle desire to stop moving at a young age. Our saving rate is fairly high, but we rarely feel like we're repressively frugal because our experience for more stuff haven't moved much. It's not that our aspirations are non-existent. We like nice stuff and live comfortably. We just got the goalpost to stop moving. This would not work for everyone, and it only works for us because we both agree to it equally. Neither of us are compromising for the other. Most of what we get pleasure from going for walks, reading podcasts, cost little, so we rarely feel like we're missing out. On the rare occasion when I question our saving rate, I think of the independence my parents earned from years of high savings, and I quickly come back. Independence is our top goal. A secondary benefit of maintaining a lifestyle below what you can afford is avoiding the psychological treadmill of keeping up with the Jonas, comfortably living below what you can afford without much desire for more. Remove a tremendous amount of frustration that many people in the modern first world subject themselves to. Nassim Taleb explained, true success is exciting some red race to modulate one's activity for peace of mind. I liked it. We're so far committed to the independence camp that we have done things that make little sense on paper. We won our house without a mortgage, which is the worst financial decision we have ever made, but the best money decision we have ever made. Mortgage mortgage interest rates were obviously low when we bought our house. Any rational advisor would recommend taking advantage of cheap money and investing extra saving in higher return assets like stock. But our goal isn't to be coldly rational, just psychologically reasonable. The independence feelings I get from owning our house outright far exceeds the financial gain I did get from leveraging our assets with a cheap mortgage. Eliminating the monthly payment feels better than maximizing the long-term value of our assets. It makes me feel independent. I don't try to defend this decision to those pointing out its flaws or those who would never do the same. On paper, it's defenseless, but it works for us. We like it. That's what matters. Good decisions aren't always rational. At some point, you have to choose between being happy or being right. We also keep a higher percentage of our assets in cash than most financial advisors would recommend, something around 20% of our assets outside the value of our house. This is also close to infeasible on paper, and I am not recommending it to others. It's just what works for us. We do it because cash is the oxygen of independence, and more importantly, we never want to be forced to sell the stock we want. We want the probability of facing a huge expense and needing to liquidate stocks to cover it to be as close to zero as possible. Perhaps we just have a lower risk tolerance than others. But everything I have learned about personal finance tells me that everyone without exceptions will eventually face a huge expense. They did not expect and they don't plan for this expense specifically because they did not expect them. The few people who know the details of our finances. What are you saving for? A house, a boat, a new car? No, none of this. I am saving for a world where curveballs are more common than we expect, not being forced to sell stocks to cover an expense also. Mean we are increasing the odds of letting the stocks we own compound for the longest period of time. Charlie Munger put it well. The first rule of compounding is to never interpret it unnecessarily. How my family thinks about investing. I started my career as a stock picker. At the time, we only owned individual stocks, mostly large companies like Berkshire Hathaway and Procter and Gamble, mixed with smaller stocks. I considered deep value investments. Go back to my 20s, and at any given point, I held something like 25 individual stocks. I don't know how I did as a stock picker. Did I beat the market? I am not sure. Like most who try, I didn't keep good score. With way, I have shifted my view, and now every stock we own is a low-cost index fund. I don't have anything against actively picking stocks, either on your own or thought giving your money to an active fund manager. I think some people can outperform the market averages. It's just very hard and harder than most people think. If I had to summarize my views on investing, it's this. Every investor should pick a strategy that has the highest odds of successfully meeting their goals. And I think for most investor dollar cost averaging into a low cost index fund will provide the highest odds of long-term success. That doesn't mean index investing will always work. It doesn't mean it's for everyone. And it doesn't mean active stock picking is doomed to fail. In general, this industry has become to interact on one side or the other, particularly those mentally against active investing. Beating the market should be bad. The odds of success should be low. If they weren't, everyone would do it. And if everyone did it, there would be no opportunity. So no one should be surprised that the majority of those trying to beat the market fail to do so. The statistics show 85% of large cap active managers didn't beat the S&P 500 over the decades ending 2019. I know people who think it's insane to try to beat the market but encourage their kids to reach for the stars and try to become professional athletes. To each their own. Life is about playing the odds, and we all think about odds a little differently. Over the years, I came around to the view that we will have a high chance of meeting all of our family's financial goals if we consistently invest money into a low-cost index fund for decades on end, leaving the money alone to compound. A lot of this view comes from our lifestyle of frugal spending. If you can meet all your goals without having to take the added risk that comes from trying to outperform the market, then what's the point of even trying? I can afford to not be the greatest investor in the world, but I can't afford to be a bad one. When I think of it that way, the choice to buy the index and hold on is a no-brainer for us. I know not everyone will agree with that logic, especially my friends whose job it is so beat the market. I respect what they do, but this is what works for us. We invest money from every paycheck into this index funds, a combination of US and international stocks. There's no set goal. It's just whatever is left over after we spend. We max out retirement accounts in the same funds and contribute to our kids' 529 college saving plans. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that for us. I like it simple. One of my deeply held investing beliefs is that there is little correlation between investment effort and investment results. The reason is because the world is driven by tails. A few variables account for the majority of returns. No matter how hard you try at investing, you won't do well if you miss the two or three things that move the needle in your strategy. The reserve is true. Reverse is true. Simple investment strategy can work great as long as they capture the few things that are important to that strategy's success. My investing strategies doesn't rely on picking the right sector or timing the next recession. It relies on a high saving rate, patience, and optimism that the global economy will create value over the next several decades. I spend virtually all of my investing effort thinking about those three things, especially the first two, which I can control. I have changed my investment strategy in the past, so of course, there's chance I will change it in the future. No matter how we save or invest, I am sure we will always have the goal of independence, and we will always do whatever maximizes for sleeping well at night. We think it's the ultimate goal, the mastery of the psychology of money. But to each their own. No one is crazy. Today's last part of this book, postscript, a brief history of why the US consumer thinks the why they do. To understand the psychology of the modern consumer and to grasp where they might be handling next, you have to know how they got there. How we all got here. If you fell asleep in 1945 and woke up in 2020, you would not recognize the world around you. The amount of economic growth that took place during that period is virtually unprecedented. If you saw if you saw the level of wealth in New York and San Francisco, you did be shocked. If you compared it to the poverty of Detroit, you be you did be shocked. If you saw the price of homes, college tuitions, and healthcare, you did be shocked. If you saw how average Americans think about saving and spending in general, you did be shocked. And if you tried to think of a reasonable narrative of how it all happened, my guess is be you did be totally wrong because it isn't intuitive and it wasn't foreseeable. What happened in America since the end of World War II is the story of the American consumer. It's story that helps explain why people think about money the way they do today. The short story is this: things were very uncertain, then they were very good, then pretty bad, then really good, then really bad, and now here we are. And there is, I think, a narrative that's link all those events together. Not a detailed account, but a story of how things fit together. Since this is an attempt to link the big event together, it leaves out many details of what happened during this period. I am likely to agree with anyone who points out what I have missed. The goal here is not to describe every play, it's to look at how one game influenced the next. Here, now, how the modern consumer got here. First is August 1945, World War II ends. Japan's surrounding was the happiest day in American history, the New York Times wrote. But there's the saying, history is just one damn thing after another. The joy of the war ending was quickly met with the question, what happens now? 16 million Americans, 11% of the population, served in the war. About 8 million were overseas at the end. Their average age was 23. Within 18 months, or what 1.5 million of them would be home and out of uniform. And then what? What were they going to do next? What? Where were where were they going to work? Where were they going to live? Those were the most important question of the day for two reasons. One, no one knew the answer. Two, if they couldn't be answered quickly, the most likely scenario in the size of money economies was that the economy would slip back into the depth of the Great Depression. Three focus had built up during the war. First is housing construction ground to a halt. Virtually all production capacity was shifted to building whose supply. Fewer than 12,000 homes per month were built in 1943, equivalent to less than one new home per American city. Returning soldiers faced a housing shortage. Second is the specific jobs created during the war, building ships, tanks, and plants, were very suddenly, not necessarily after it, stopping with a speed and magnitude rarely seen in private business. It was unclear where soldiers could work. Third is the marriage rate spiked during and immediately after the war. Soldiers didn't want to return to their mother's basement. They want to start a family in their own homes with a good job right away. This worried policymakers, especially since the Great Depression was still a recent memory, having ended just 5 years prior. In 1946, the Council of Economic Advisors delivered a report to President Truman warning of a full-scale depression sometime in the next one of the 4 years. They wrote in a separate 1947 memo summarizing a meeting with Truman. We might be in some sort of recession period where we should have to be very sure of our ground as to whether recessionary force might be in danger of getting out of hand. There is a substantial prospect which should not be overlooked that a further decline may increase the danger of a downward spiral into depression conditions. This fear was exacerbated by the fact that Expo couldn't be immediately relied upon for growth, as two of the largest economies, Europe and Japan, sat in ruins dealing with humanities crisis, and America itself was buried in more debt than ever before, limiting direct government stimulus. So we did something about it. Second is low interest rates and the international birth of the American consumers. The first thing we did to keep the economy afloat after the war was keep interest rates low. This wasn't an easy decision because when soldiers came home to a shortage of everything from clothes to cars. It temporarily sent inflation into double digits. The Federal Reserve was not politically independent before 1951. The President and the Fed could coordinate policy. In 1942, the Fed announced it would keep short-term rates at 0.38% to help finance the war. Rates didn't budge a single basis point for the next 7 years. 3 months Treasury yields stayed below 2% until the mid 1950s. The explicit reason for keeping rates down was to keep the cost of financing the equivalent of the $6 trillion we spent on the war low. But low rates also did something else for all the returning GIs. It made borrowing to buy homes, cars, gadgets, and toys really cheap, which from a paranoid policymaker perspective was great consumption became an explicit economic strategy in the years after World War II, an era of encouraging thrift and saving to fund the war quickly turned into an era of actively prompting spending. Princeton history, Sheldon Grant writes, after 1945, American again diverged from patterns of saving, promotion in Europe and East Asia. Politicians, businessmen, and labor leaders all encourage Americans to spend to foster economic growth. Two things fueled this push. One was the GA Bill, which offered unprecedented mortgage opportunities. 16 million veterans could buy a home, often with no money down, no interest in the first year, and fixed rates so and fixed rates so low that monthly mortgage payment could be lower than a rental. The second was an explosion of consumer credit enabled by the losing of Depression-era regulations. The first credit card was introduced in 1950. Store credit, installment credit, personal loans, payday loans, everything took off. And interest on all debts, including credit cards, was tax deductible at the time. It tasted delicious, so we ate a lot of it. A simple story in a simple table. Household debts in the 1950s grew 1.5 times faster than it did during the 2000s debt closures. Third is pent-up demand for stuff fed by a credit boom and a hidden 1930s productivity boom led to an economic boom. The 1930s were the hardest economic decades in American history, but there was a silver lining that took 2 decades to notice. By necessity, the Great Depression had supercharged resourcefulness, productivity, and innovation. We didn't pay that much attention to the productive boom in this sphere was exacerbated by the fact the export couldn't be immediately relied upon for sorry boom in the 30s because everyone was focused on how bad the economy was. We didn't pay attention to it in the 40s because everyone was focused on the war. Then the 1950s came around and we suddenly realized, wow, we have some amazing new invention and we are really good at making them. Appliances, cars, phones, air conditioning, electricity. It was nearly impossible to buy many household goods during the war because factories were converted to make guns and ships. That created pent-up demand from GIs for stuff after the war ended. Mary Dagger to get on with life and boldness, bold with new cheap consumer credit. They went on a buying spree like the country had never seen. Frederick Lewis Allen writes in his book, The Big Change. During these post-war years, the farmer bought a new tractor, a corn picker, and electric machine, milking machine. In fact, he and his neighbors between them assembled a formidable array of farm machinery for their joint use. The farmer's wife bought the shiny white electric refrigerator she had always longed for and never during the Great Depression had been able to afford, and on up to that washing machine and a deep freeze unit. The suburban families installed a dishwashing machine and invested in a powered lawn owner or loaner. The city families become customer of a lawnmower mart and required a television set for a living room. The husband's office was air conditioned, and so on endlessly. It's hard to overstate how big this surge was. Commercial car and truck manufacturing virtually ceased from 1942 to 1945. Then 21 million cars were sold from 1945 to 1949. Another 37 million were sold by 1955. Just under 2 million homes were built from 1940s to 1945. Then 7 million were built from 1945 to 1950. Another 8 million were built by 1955. Pent-up demand for stuff and our newfound ability to make stuff created the jobs that put returning GIs back to work, and they were good jobs too. Mix that with consumer credit and America's capacity for spending exploded. The Federal Reserve wrote to President Truman in 1951. By 1950, total consumer expenditure together with residential construction amounted to about $203 billion, or in the neighborhood of 40% above the 1944 level. The answer to the question, what are all these GIs going to do after the war, was now obvious. They were going to buy stuff with money earned from their jobs making new stuff, helped by cheap borrowed money to buy even more stuff. For this, gains are shared more equally than ever before. The defining characteristic of economies in the 1950s is that the country got rich by making the poor less poor. Average wages doubled from 1940 to 1948, then doubled again by 1963, and those gains focus on those who had been left behind for decades before. The gap between rich and poor narrowed by an extraordinary amount. Lewis Allen wrote in 1955, the enormous lead of the well-to-do in the economic race has been considerably reduced. It is the industrial works who as a group have done best, people such as the slip-pick workers, families who used to live on $2,500 and now are getting $4,500, or the highly skilled machine tool operators family who used to have $3,000 and now can spend an annual $5,500 or more. As for the top 1%, the really well-to-do and the rich whom we might classify very roughly indeed as the $16,000 and our group. Their share of the total national income after taxes had come down by 1945 from 13% to 7%. This was not a short-term trend. Real income for the bottom 20% of wage earners grew by a nearly identical amount as the top 5% from 1950 to 1980. The equality went beyond wages. Women held jobs outside the homes in record numbers. Their labor force participation rate went from 31% after the war to 37% by 1955 and to 40% by 1965. Minorities gained to after the 1945 inauguration. Illinois result wrote about an African American reporter who told her, "Do you realize what 12 years have done?" If at the 1933 receptions a number of colored people had gone down the line and mixed with everyone else in the way they did today, every paper in the country would have reported it. We do not even think it is news, and none of us will mention it. Women and minority rights were still a fraction of what they are today, but the progress toward equality in the late 40s and 50s was extraordinary. The living out of classes meant a living out of lifestyles. Normal people drove Chelsea. Rich people drove candles, TV and radio equalized the entertainment and culture people enjoyed regardless of class. Mail order catalogs equalized the clothes people bought and the goods they bought regardless of where they lived. Hartford's magazine note in 1957, the rich man smokes the same sort of cigarettes as the poor man, shaves with the same sort of razor, uses the same sort of telephones, vacuum cleaners, radio, and TV sets, has the same sort of lighting and eating equipment in his house, and so on independently the difference between his automobile and the poor man's are minor. Essentially, they have similar agencies, similar fitting. In the early years of the century, there was a hierarchy of automobiles. Paul Graham wrote in 2016 about what something as simple as there only being 3 TV stations did to equalized culture. It's difficult to imagine now, but every night tens of millions of families would sit down together in front of their TV sets, watching the same show at the same time as their next door neighbors. What neighbors? What happens now with the Super Bowl used to happen every night? We were literally in sync. This was important. People measure their well-being against their peers, and for most of the 1945 to 1980 periods, people had a lot of what looked like peers to compare themselves to. Most people lived lives that were either equal or at least further mobile to those around them. The idea that people's lives equalize as much as their incomes is an important point of these stories we will come back to. Fifth is debt rose tremendously, but so did income. So the impact wasn't a big deal. Household debt increased fivefold from 1947 to 1957 due to the combination of the new consumption culture, new debt products, and interest rates subsidized by government programs and held low by the Federal Reserve. But income growth was so strong during this period that the impact on household wasn't served, and household debts was so low to begin with after the war. The Great Depression wiped out a lot of it, and household spending was so culturalized during the war that debt accumulation was restricted. So the growth in household debt to income from 1947 to 1957 was manageable. Household debt to income today is just over 100% even after rising in the 1950s, 1960s and 1970s. It stayed below 60%. Driving a lot of this debt boom was a surge in home ownership. The home ownership rates in 19s was 47%. It stayed right about there for the next 4 decades. Then it took off, hitting 53% by 1945 and 62% by 1970. A substantial portion of the population was now using debt that previous generation could not have exceed, and they were mostly okay with it. David Halberstam writes in this book, The 50s, they were confident in themselves and their futures in a way that growing up in harder times found striking. They did not fear death as their parents had. They different from their parents, not just in how much they made and what they want, but in their belief that the future had already arrived. As the first homeowners is in their families, they brought a new excitement and pride with them to do the store as they bought furniture or appliances. In other times, young couples might have exhibited such feeling as they bought clothes for their first baby. It was as if the very accomplishment of owning a home reflected such an impatience. Breakthrough made of that nothing was too good to buy for it. Now, now, good time to connect a few things as they will become increasingly important. First is America is booming. Second is it's booming together like never before. Third is it's booming with that isn't a big deal at the time because it's still low relative to income, and there's cultural acceptance that that isn't scary things. Sixth is things start cracking. 1973 was the first year where it became clear the economy was walking down a new path. The recession that began that year brought unemployment to the highest it had been since the 1930s. Inflation surged, but unlike the post-war spikes, it stayed high. Short-term interest rate hit 8% in 1973, up from 2.5% decades earlier. And you have to put all of that in the context of how much fear there was between Vietnam riots and the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Jones and Bobby Kennedy. It got black. America dominated the world economy in the 2 decades after the war. Many of the largest countries had their manufacturing capacity bombed into trouble. But as the 1970s emerged, that changed. Japan was booming, China's economy was opening up, the Middle East was flexing its oil muscles. A combination of lucky economic advantages and a cultural shared by the greatest generation hardened by the depression and anchored in symmetric cooperation from the war shift when boomers began coming of age. A new generation that had a different view of what's normal hit at the same time a lot of the economic tailwinds of the previous 2 decades ended. Everything in finance is data within the context of expectation. One of the biggest shifts of the last century happened when the economic winds began blowing in a different uneven direction. Economic winds began blowing in a different uneven direction, but because expectations were still rooted in a post-war culture of equalities. Not necessarily equality of income, although there was that, but equality is lifestyle and consumption expectations. The idea that someone earning a 50th percentile income shouldn't live a life dramatically different than someone in the 80th, 90th percentile, and that someone in the 99th percentile lived a better life, but still a life that someone in the 50th percentile could comprehend. That's how America worked for most of the 1945 to 1980 period. It doesn't matter whether you think that's morally right or wrong. It just matters that it happened. Expectations always move slower than facts, and the economic facts of the years between the early 1970s through the early 2008, where that growth continued but became become more uneven, yet people's expectation of how their lifestyle should compare to their peers did not change. 70s. The boom resumes, but it's different than before. Ronald Reagan's 1984 Morning in America had declared, "It's morning again in America. Today more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history." With interest rates at about half the record heights of 1980s, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any times in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 66,500 young men and women will be married, and with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. Thank you.